Well, it's going to be kind of a boring one today. This weather's so jacked up, all I can really do right now is service tractors. I'd like to be cleaning some fence rows right now. Well, I got one more field I'd like to get done yet for sure that I don't think is going to happen. And I got another field that would be nice to get done but doesn't really need to happen. I got the worst part of it Sunday. I went out Sunday morning and tried cutting because I got one field where I wanted to knock a couple limbs off so I could get a better driveway into it, because there was one I had to climb like a little, I don't know, 4-foot hill that dropped off the road, and it was a lady's yard, and she was fine with it, but climbing the hill, especially with the combines, you'd spin a little bit, and she didn't care, but it still bothered me tearing her yard up like that. So on the opposite corner of the field, there used to be a driveway there, but the limbs had all grown into it, so I went in and chopped them limbs out so I can get through there and not tear a yard up. So I did get that done, but it was so damn muddy. Like, if it was a good thing I could stay up by the road and get it done, because I'd have got stuck bigger than shit with a tractor. But can't do any more fence row cleaning until the ground freezes up, and I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon, judging by the weather. Got $1,000 for the combine parts in that box. I'd like to get a little bit of work done on the combines this winter. I got, well, 7300 doesn't need much. I got a couple bearings I got to change to variable speed. I got new idler pulleys. Yeah. I hate this box. Oh, got these new idler pulleys I got to put on. The unload system on it, that run the belt that engages all the unload augers on it. 525's getting new tailings elevator chain and bearing blocks on the walkers. Go figure, you can still buy brand new bearing blocks for that thing, still an AGCO bag. And then a couple belts to change. Those are the paddles for the tailings elevator, walker bearings, or walker crank bearings. Yeah. And then on the 525, I got to drop the transmission out of it because it keeps popping out of third gear, and I want to know why. But anyway, I can't really do that because I got to run them over to a buddy's shop, and I don't really want to run them in the salt. And with the weather not being able to decide if it wants to rain, snow, or stay dry, I don't want to get stuck over there and not be able to bring it home, because I really don't want to run the combines in the salt, because who runs combines in salt? So anyhow, working on tractors is what we got for now, and it needs to get done anyhow. So this thing, I got to change the oil in it. I fouled out a plug on number 4. I got to pull the plugs out and wire brush them or wire wheel them. Be nice to have a spark plug blaster, but I don't even know if they make those anymore. I don't even know if that's a thing. Change the oil, clean spark plugs, and then I got to pull the amp gauge out of it to get rebuilt, because for some reason the needle came disconnected from whatever happens inside of an amp gauge, and it just kind of, I can show you a little bit, it kind of just does whatever the hell it wants in there. So yeah, that's pretty much it. So, and I got a guy coming over to pick up a hose I made, so if there's a weird cut in the video, it's because he showed up. Must be an air bubble in the... Holy shit! I don't remember putting it down there that tight. I need to find a new drain plug for this thing. This one's getting a little locked out. Okay, seriously, holy shit. Frankly, that's a bit concerning, really. I'm gonna get a socket though. I don't like the way that thing... It's it's rolling a little bit. I seriously don't know why the hell that's so tight though. And 6-point socket. We're going to see how this video turns out. When I was working on the 55, anytime I started making a video, I'd turn the radio off, because YouTube and their infinite wisdom, their algorithm can't. There it goes. I don't get it. I don't know why it wouldn't come loose with the wrench. It wasn't even that tight. I'm confused. Anyway, YouTube's stupid algorithm can't recognize music that was put into a video intentionally from music that was put, that like is playing in the background and wasn't intended to be put in the video on purpose, and they'll catch it and you get a copyright strike and it's retarded. That being said, I cannot stand to work in a quiet shop. It annoys the crap out of me, so I got the radio playing for the background noise, and we're going to see how this turns out. I think I got it quiet enough that, I hope I got it quiet enough that the camera doesn't pick it up all that great. We'll find out. But anyway, yeah, this old girl, I probably need to get it. Well, eventually I'm gonna have to get the motor rebuilt in it, because, and it really only does it on a number 4 cylinder, but I think the rings are getting weak in it, and it likes to oil foul number 4 plug, and it'll start missing. And it really only does it if you don't work it hard, but all I do with this tractor anymore is drill, beans, and spray, so it doesn't really get worked that hard. And so yeah, it'll normally do it about once or twice a year. I gotta go through and clean the plugs in it. Normally it's only when it's cold like this, 'cause it did it. Oh, it was right there around Christmas time. I went up there to the barn and started my grain truck, and we got 3 fleet lines sitting up there now, so we had to rearrange the barn when Dad's grain truck showed up. So I went up there and started all the tractors in my grain truck to charge the batteries in them. This ain't been started in a while, and this thing was sitting up there, and with the straight pipe on it, this thing's got enough of a thump to it that I could hear it down here. I knew immediately when the plug started, or when the plug fouled out, because it immediately changed tone. And so yeah, I gotta pull them out of here. But the problem I'm gonna have is I gotta hunt for a new block. Because when we got this thing, it had a knock in it, and it was slow enough that it was a rod knock. Well, I guess I should say it was fast enough it was a rod knock. And Dad pulled the pan off of it when we brought it home, and plastic gauged the crank bearings. And when he took the main caps off of it to put the plastic gauge in it, a bunch of washers and shit fell off of the rear main cap. He's like, that was kind of weird, because who put flat washers on a main cap? Well, he put it together without the washers, and when you're miking a crank in the block, you got to put a bottle jack under it and push. You don't push hard, but you push up on the crank a little bit to get it seated up in the top bearings. That way, when you put the main caps on, the weight of the crank doesn't crush the plastic gauge, and you get a good reading on it. And when he did that, he torqued everything up to spec, and it locked the motor up. And the only thing we could figure is when they machined this block, they didn't have the main cap, because when they line bore a block, they put all the caps in and they torque them, and then they line bore it, and then that way all of your crank journals are in line with each other when they line bore the block. Well, the only thing we could figure is they didn't have that main cap torqued right, or when they decked the mounting pads where the main caps butt up to the block, something was out of square or something. Anyway, the bore for the rear main cap is out around, and when you torque it up to spec with the main bearings in it, it clamps down so tight on the crank that the crank won't turn, which is why they had the washers in there, and this motor had been rebuilt because it had new bearings in it when we bought it, so it wasn't something that Oliver did at the factory. But whoever rebuilt it stuffed all them washers and shit in there to get clearance so that the motor would run. So Dad figured out what he needed for shims and made shims on a surface grinder to make that rear main cap work right. So everything in the bottom end is fine now, except to make it right, when I finally rebuild this motor, I really just need to find a good block and a good set of main caps and use my head, my crank. All I need is the block casting and the main caps. I don't need anything else, but it'd be nice to find a block to make it right. Which also brings me to another thing, and this is for anybody that's ever looking at a 66. When we brought it home, this side of the block was all covered in, like, this was fresh out of the barn. They didn't wash it, nothing. They just took her to the auction and that was it. This side was all covered in chaff and barn dust and what have you. And when Dad, I think it was when he power washed it after we brought it home, because I was only 8 when we brought this thing home, so I had the attention span of a jackrabbit. My involvement in the initial was basically just holding the light for Dad, like most kids that age. But there is a crack in the what they had done was thrown a bunch of extra paint on this side of the block to cover up the fact that they had brazed a crack shut in the block right here. And you probably won't be able to see it that good in a video, but if you run your finger over it, you can feel it. It's right here. And they actually did a good job of brazing it. It doesn't leak, but they didn't, like, grind anything off, and there was just a big old ugly gobber of shit right here that they tried to cover up with paint, and then they threw a bunch of chaff and stuff on it to cover it up. So basically all Dad did was grind it off, and if I remember right, he did smear a little bit of JB Weld on there and set it up and sand it off just in case there was any pinholes in it. But that block's been cracked like that since we got it, and it hasn't leaked drop a coolant. But for anybody that's looking at a 66, it is very common right about here behind the carburetor to have a hairline crack in the water jacket. It's just the way they are. If they ever let the coolant mixture get out of spec and the coolant froze a little bit, the block cracks right here, and you hardly ever see it on the 77s and the 88s, but for some reason the 66 is always right here. That does not affect the performance of the motor at all, and it is a very easy fix. So if you ever see that, don't really just be aware you got to fix it, but be aware that it is fixable. It's not that big of a deal, because it literally just goes into the water jacket. It doesn't affect the mechanicals whatsoever. But that's something to look for at a 66. So anyhow, it's best to let that oil drain a little bit, let the filter drain down so you don't make a mess. So I guess I'll pop these plugs out of here and go from there. That's number 4 plug. It doesn't do it bad, but it does it just enough. And right there in the center of the electrode, it's not touching quite, but it's just enough to make it misfire. And that's all it does. So I mean, the rings it's definitely oil fouling. So the rings are a little weak. It's not bad enough that I say the rings are shot, but they're weak. So, and it runs good and it doesn't burn oil. So, I mean, this thing will go a full year, not use a drop of oil. So it doesn't burn much, but whatever it is must be number 4, because this is really the only plug that ever looks like this. So, but I always clean them all, just because you're there, you might as well do it. So, and all I do is clean them up on a wire wheel and a bench grinder. Like I say, it'd be nice to have a spark plug blaster, but I don't even know if they make them anymore, because the new spark plugs they make with it, like the iridium spark plugs and stuff they use in the new vehicles, I don't even know if anybody cleans spark plugs anymore, really. So I don't know if they even make a spark plug blaster. For anybody that doesn't know what it is, it's a little baby sandblaster with a little rubber boot in it, and you stick a spark plug inside the boot, and the boot holds it, and you just hit a button, it'll shoot, it'll just sandblast the end of the plug real quick, and they come out nice and squeaky clean, and it's a lot nicer than wire brushing, because it'll get up inside and everything, and that thing will be clean as brand new. Then you reset your gap and away you go. But we had one in an auto shop when I was in high school. That's frankly the only one I've ever seen. So anyway, get the plugs cleaned up, go from there. Alright, so the trick on these fleet lines, and the supers for that matter too, if you want to pull a filter off without making a big damn mess, get the pan drain and then just let it sit for a little bit, and then you take the filter and unscrew it, and you just let it, once you get it unscrewed, you just let it drop back in the housing and just let it sit there like that. Now let it get enough of a gulp of air, the filter will drain down into the pan and not make a mess. And then, for another little tip, on the fleet line, they had 2 different types of oil tubes on these filters. The fleet lines had a tall tube, and then I believe it was when they changed to the supers. I've never actually looked up the serial number break. It was either the late fleet lines or when they made the switch to the supers, they went to a little stubby one that was only about yay tall. And the problem they had was everybody would go to change these filters, would pull them part way up, pull them out, and they'd snap those tubes off. Well, what this is the oil comes in through there, comes in the top of the filter, falls back down, and then that's the return into the block right there. So if you bust that off, the oil doesn't use the whole filter. It just stays right down here and falls back in, and your filter doesn't work worth a damn. So that's why they went to the shorter one on the supers, is so guys wouldn't break those off and you could still use the whole filter. But if you ever work on a fleet line and this tube isn't there, it's been broke off, you need to replace it. And I can't remember, I don't think it was this one. One of them we got, I can't remember if it was a 70. Pretty sure it wasn't that one. That looks original. One of these we brought home. Dad had to replace that tube, and it just presses in. This is just an aluminum housing. That tube just presses in. If you get on them with a pair of vice grips, you can wiggle them out, and then all you need is a piece of tubing and drill a cross hole in it and press it back in, and that's all you need to do to replace it. It ain't no big deal, but just not having it there. And then these filters have a ball screw on them. Well, It's almost like the kind of thread you'd find on a mason jar, really, really coarse and round. And, okay, I was going to say, there better be an O-ring for this thing. When you put these on, don't you dare get near them with an oil filter wrench. Hand tight, literally, that's all you got to do. They don't take much. Because if you over tighten it, the threads will pop. And it'll loosen itself back up. You don't need to over tighten these things. So, and that's the other side of it. And the, I don't know how well you can see it, but in the filter housing, the threads aren't even as deep as they are on the filter. They're just, they don't take a whole lot of torque. Because these things only run like 15, 20 pounds oil pressure. They don't run shit for pressure, so it ain't like it's pushing on the filter. So, anyhow, that's just a little tip for changing the oil filter on a fleet line anyway. Alrighty. Oil's changed. Everything should be good to go. Start it. Oh yeah, it's a lot nicer without the damn mist. See, and that amp gauge. Huh. It acts like it's working. But I know it's lying. Give me a minute. Yep, see, right there. That needle, it'll be a lot more blatantly obvious when I get it out. I don't know if you can see it. It like moves in and out from the gauge face, and it's like it's not even connected to anything anymore. When I had this thing out plowing with it this fall, I was going over to hook the plow up, and I noticed it was like just dancing back and forth. Go to negative 20, then positive 20, then it'd like dance around, and it'd just do whatever the hell it wants. I was like, that, because I had just had the generator rebuilt this winter. Or, not this winter, earlier this fall, because I can't remember what the heck it did. But, yeah, it just flat out quit charging on me one day. I couldn't remember if it locked up or what, but I had the generator rebuilt, and then like 3 weeks later, I had this thing out to take it plowing, and the gauge did that, and I was like, well, that's not right. And at first, I thought they did a shoddy job of rebuilding the generator, and then I started watching what the needle was doing. It's like, that needle's not connected to anything anymore. It's just in there dancing around whenever the tractor bounces. So, got to pull that out of there, but run it long enough to check the oil and make sure I got enough in there. It should hold 4 quarts. I know it holds 4 quarts. I always put 4 quarts in it. Don't really care how much you know your motor. Run it, check it. That's just how it should work. So, anyway, get this done and get set up, pull that gauge out. Yeah, I dare say she's a little foobarred. I got it out of the dash and the needle did that. It just kind of, whatever the hell it wants to do. And the problem I run into, these were made by a company called Antique Gauges Inc., which I think they were in Massachusetts, I want to say, somewhere over on the East Coast. And they're not in business anymore, because these gauges are 17 or 18 years old, something like that. And they're match set. And as far as reproduction gauges go for the Olivers, they were the most correct looking restoration quality gauges you could have got. And ever since this place went out of business, because I think it was a husband and wife outfit, and I think the husband died, and that was the end of it, unfortunately. But these were the best looking gauges that you could get for these things. And now, for the longest time, the ones that you could get just looked like shit. They were knockoff China gauges, and the faces weren't quite right. and the needles were really wrong. Because the original gauges in these were made by Stuart Warner, which is what this gauge is, which this was in that Super 55, and it did work, so I'm going to throw it in this thing just so I got a gauge in it. Hopefully it still works. But the Stuart Warner, like the amp gauges, they have this notch in it for the needle to rotate in, and these gauges had that notch in it, so they looked right. The new gauges, the faces and everything look better and the needles look better, but they have this big cutout right here for the needle to pivot to rotate on and all that. The new ones are made by a company called Evergreen Restoration out of, I believe they're from Iowa, and they're the gauges like Corv sells and some of the other places, or you could buy them right from Evergreen. But they look better than the China gauges that were in between these antique gauges and the Evergreens. They're still not right. They're definitely better. They're going in the right direction. The faces are... the yellow is a little too bright, and there's just a couple things that are off in them. They look decent if you buy the set, but my oil pressure gauge and my temp gauge still work fine, and I don't want to replace all three gauges. And you can't just buy an amp gauge because the face looks different, and it will be blatantly obvious that the amp gauge is different if you put it in with that set, and that would just annoy the shit out of me because I'm OCD and I can't be having none of that. So right after this happened to me, I started calling around, and I found a place over on the other side of the state called Bob's Speedometer, and I called that place up, and he said he's pretty sure he could fix it. So said it'd probably be about $100, which seems kind of pricey, but I also think that these gauges were like 170, almost $200 to buy back 17, 18 years ago, whenever it was we put them in the tractor. So, and it'd still be a matching set. So in my mind, it's worth $100 just to fix the gauge and still have a matching set that looks right for the tractor. But anyway, I'm gonna throw this gauge in there and hopefully it works. It did work, so we'll see. That's a 10 to 20, or that's a 0 to 30. This is a 0 to 30. That's a 0 to 20. I don't think it makes a difference other than how far the needle moves. But even if it doesn't work, it'll just hold the wires and keep shit from shorting out and arcing and whatnot in there. And actually, I don't think these things, I think the gauge has to be hooked up in order for them to even charge, because I think it completes the circuit. So you need something in there anyway. But Stuart Warner actually still makes this gauge set. They make I got on their website and they have, I can't remember what the hell they call it. They got a page on there that they have like a bunch of vintage face gauge sets, and they still make this set with all three of these gauges in it, and the amp gauge looks exactly the same. They have a 0 to 30 and a 0 to 20 set, but you can only get them black face, white lettering, white needle, for obvious reasons, and they're not going to be making an Oliver set anyway. It'd be great if they did, and I'm kind of surprised that they don't. Damn air compressor, hang on. I'm kind of surprised that they don't, because back in the day, Stuart Warner made gauges for everybody. I'm pretty sure, I think they made Deere's gauges. I'm pretty sure they made IH's gauges. They made Oliver's gauges. I mean, back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, Stuart Warner, they were the gauge people. So I'm actually kind of surprised that, especially since it's Stuart Warner and they probably still have all of the specs for everybody if they have an archive, I'm kind of surprised that they don't offer this gauge set, and all they got to do is change the faces. And obviously you need a black needle, but it wouldn't be that hard. It'd be kind of nice if they did it, but they don't. So this is what we got to work with anyhow. That's kind of a long drawn out answer, or ramble or whatever you want to call it. So I'm going to throw that gauge in there and see what we can make happen here. Okay, see if that gauge works. Honestly, being at 0 to 30, this thing might not pull it or push enough amp to even move that needle. Ah well, it ain't in there permanent. So, anyhow, with that, this tractor pretty much ready to go. So the curtain's back on it, put it back in the barn, really. Well, I had planned on changing the oil in this thing today too, because I thought I had a filter for it, but I just went down in the barn to get it, and turns out the oil filter that I thought was for this is actually the fuel filter for the 4150, so gonna have to get some filters ordered, because I need some for the, actually I need the oil filters for the 150, and I need filters for the 55 and the 1800, the 1955 and the 1800 too, so yeah. But I had to bring it up here regardless, because I gotta pull the curl cylinders off of it and put new seals in them, because this guy's leaking like a sieve. It doesn't leak when you're using it, but when it's just sitting in the barn with no pressure on it, it'll sit there and weep. So that tells me that the gland seal in it's getting kind of hard. So pull them off, tear them apart, get the seals out of them, so I know what I need to get. And I guess since didn't get a really good video of this thing when it was down in the barn when I showed it the first time a few videos back, give you a better view of it now. Better view of the brackets we had to modify. Now that you can actually see, you can this right here is the original bracket that would bolt on a American 60 or an American 80, and there's a 4-bolt pattern on it to match the flange on the back of a 60 or an 80, which on those tractors is forward of the pads on a 4-digit. So we had to add this to it to catch these 4 bolts up here, and then we caught 2 in the back. So, and then this thingamajigger here is a bar clamp I made for carrying a saw around with me. That comes in handy. So really, that's the only modification you got to make to the load. Well, I'll take that back. There is one more. On the front saddle bracket that the loader sits in, the bolt pattern, there's 2 more bolts behind the bar here. The bolt pattern in it is the exact same as the weight pattern on the front of a 4-digit, but on an American 60 or an American 80, the axle is tucked back up under the frame. This isn't here, and there is a piece that, well, this actually extends down about another inch, and it interferes with the wishbone on the front axle. So I just had to stick that up in a mill and milled an inch of it off for clearance. It doesn't affect anything. And then the only other thing you got to do is on these loaders, it's a quick attach loader and you're supposed to be able to rock it off the tractor. Well, there's originally a U-shaped bracket that hung down about yay far off of this, and when you back the tractor up to get this bar out of the saddle, you rocked the front of the loader down, and that bar sat down on the ground and picked the loader frame up off the trunnions, and you just backed the tractor out from under the loader. Well, the way the axle is on this, that wouldn't work. So we are going to come up with different brackets so that this thing can still come on and off the tractor. It's still not bad. You just got to block the front and it still comes off like it should. But I've only had this loader off this thing once since we put it on. It's pretty much the loader tractor now. Then we put the quick attach plate on it too. That makes it a standard skid loader quick attach. So we got the bucket, a grapple, and a set of pallet forks for it. So, yeah. And then obviously we added the third set of lines for the third function on the grapple to get the pincher. And then when we plumbed the loader valve in, this was the set of lines Dad bent up to get the Power Beyond. Because when you hook this up for Power Beyond, basically all the hydraulic flow of the tractor is always going through the valve, so that there's always pressure on the valve, and then it dumps back and pressurizes the rest of the system on the tractor and then goes back tank. So, yeah. That's basically just a Power Beyond loader valve. I don't really know what else to say about it. Went with steel lines instead of hoses just to make it cleaner. It's kind of it kind of sucks that all of your ports you need for the Power Beyond are on this side, and you're probably always going to have your loader valve on that side. But if you do it like this, everything, it's nice and out of the way, and it's not really that big of an issue. So, So, anyway, not changing the oil in this today. I'm going to have to get a list of filters together, but I'm going to pop them cylinders off, so do that real quick. Alright, so these guys are what's called a snap ring cylinder, which means the gland is held in by a snap ring. Now, what you got to do to get these apart is, first off, you got to find the split in the snap ring. And to do that, you just get yourself a big old pipe wrench and you turn the gland until you find where the snap ring splits, like right there. And then you take yourself either a skinny screwdriver, or if it'll fit, which that one will not fit, so either that or a pick, preferably a straight one. And then find something to set you on here. Actually, I guess right there is a good place to set it. Take that. And depending on how stiff the snap rings are, this could be a little bit of a trick. But you get under the end of the ring. Oh, this one's okay. Now this one's got to go that way then. So sometimes this happens, sometimes it doesn't. There is a hole drilled in the gland, and the snap ring's got a 90-degree bend on it that engages that hole. So unfortunately, this one's got to turn this. Well, I guess not unfortunately, but this one's got to turn this way to get the snap ring out. So I was hoping to spin it the other way because I got the cylinder locked this way. Actually, and then you get your pick. If the damn pipe wrench will bite. I keep getting in the way. Hopefully you can see this. You gotta get under that snap ring. And it'll come out just like that. And that guy right there is what holds the whole cylinder together. And then the fun part is praying to God the gland will slide out. Turn this thing back up so it's leaking. I tried to get the rod to slide so I get all the oil out of it, but it was being stubborn and refused to cooperate. Hopefully that just means that the rod seals are hard and not that something's messed up. How do I want to go about this? This is where a big slide hammer would come in handy, but we don't have one of those. I think that's too big around. Yep. I got to, hopefully you saw that camera's turned a little bit. Should have been like that. I got to go find me something to use that. And once you get the rod out this far, you just use it to tap the gland out. Come on. This is where I'm dragging the seals, I think. There we go. And generally you're gonna fight getting the damn. Yeah, that O-ring was not an O-ring anymore. Holy shit. You're generally going to fight getting the piston seal through that damn snap ring groove because it's going to want to expand and fall in. And I'm going to have some oil here. Yeah, not too bad. And that will be why I was fighting to get the rod out, right? I don't know if you can tell from in there, but right about here, damn rod's bent. So, should be able to straighten that out in the press. But, that's what you got right there. That's the gland, that's the piston. And I misspoke. This is the gland seal. The rod seal was leaking. Not on this one, on the... Nope, this one was the one that was leaking. The other one's the one that... I'm here, so I'm doing them both. But, gland seal, rod seal's inside. And then piston seal and a glide band. Which, that's basically acts as like a static bearing so that you don't got metal on metal contact. So, yep. So this is what you end up with when you're all said and done. Just got to take an impact and buzz the nut off, which I don't know what they were calling for a torque spec on that thing, but it was tight. I tried our 1/2 inch Milwaukee, that didn't, or Milwaukee impact, that didn't touch it. So I got our 3/4 inch breaker bar out in a socket with like a 3-foot hunk of pipe. I couldn't budge it and ended up having to get our 1-inch impact, and even that one had to hit it 4 or 5 times to get it to break. So she was pretty tight, but anyway, you spin the nut off, and you get your piston and your gland, and then you can pop the glide band off. like that. Trying to get you. That GoPro, it'll mess with you because you don't you can never really figure out how big of a field of vision it's got till you watch it, which is a shitty part about a GoPro because you don't got a screen, so you can't watch it. Cause I'm still rocking my old Hero 3 from 3 years ago, so I can't even believe it still worked. I didn't even have to charge a battery after 3 years. But anyway, then you gotta walk the piston seal out, which is a fun part because they're pretty tough. Come on. Sometimes you get lucky and they just break. Come on, walk off. Here we go. So that's what a piston seal looks like. And then a piston seal is energized by an O-ring. But the O-ring, it's not, normally they're not standard O-rings. Normally the O-ring and the piston seal are matched so that they work right together. So that's what a piston seal looks like in a cylinder. This is your actual sealing ring, and then it's energized by an O-ring. And then that was just an aluminum piston. And then you got your gland seal, which is an O-ring in this case. Generally is in most cases. Unless they do something weird. Sometimes you'll see a quad ring. But I don't know if you can see it. Yeah, you should be able to see it. That's actually, I don't know. I don't think it wore like that. I bet I took a bite out of that when I drug it through the snap ring groove in the cylinder. Is why it's got that goofy cut in it. Otherwise, it would have been leaking a lot worse than it was. So you got your O-ring. That is just a standard O-ring. And then the O-ring is backed up by a profiled backup ring. One side's flat, and then I don't know if you'll be able to see it or not. The other side's got a arc cut in it that matches the matches the diameter of the O-ring. So those are matched. And then you got your rod wiper, which is just a lip. It's, for all intents and purposes, a lip seal. They're different, but that's what it looks like. And sometimes those come out all right, and sometimes they don't. Generally, the easiest thing to do is come over here to the vise. And where can I set you? You'll be able to see it from there. I'll do this backwards so that you can see it. This one's going to be fun because there's not really actually a good way to get a hold of it. We can do it like that. So you kind of can't see it. I'll get it started, and then you get under it with a screwdriver. This is where sometimes they want to come out fine and sometimes they don't. The trick is getting underneath the tin cage. And this one, oh, I think I got under it. It's just not wanting to pop. Oh, I'm compressing the... Let's see what's going on there. Come on, move, you prick. Now, so you just get under the edge of it and pop it out like that. And it's a lip seal, but it's not a lip seal. Their rod wipers are their own thing, but they look like a lip seal. And then, this isn't the case with all cylinders, but this one has a packing. There's multiple seal it's a multiple seal pack held in with a snap ring and a washer. So got to get that snap ring out. So we need to get the pliers. set them over to internal so that this actually works. And then you pop this snap ring out. If it's not gonna be stubborn, come on. Damn thing. Never fails. One side will come loose and the other side will always stick. Come on, you're so close. There we go. Get the snap ring out. And then it's going to be sticky. And you got the washer. That's a seal. That's kind of a weird stack of shit. Hopefully that's something standard. Otherwise I might be calling Agco. It's a bunch of profiled seals that are like pyramid shaped and they stack on each other. But those just stack in there like that, and that, and that, and that holds that seal pack in. And then I grabbed the camera, but my hands are covered in oil. And then that's what the inside of the gland looks like. Like I say, this isn't... There's so many different ways to seal up a cylinder gland, it ain't funny. This is just one way to do it. Most of the time, especially on modern cylinders, it's just going to be a U-cup seal, which I can't show you because I ain't got one, but you'll probably see one on here at a later date anyway. So yeah, that's the cylinder all tore apart. So anyway, that's really all the further I can go today. I'm only going to take one cylinder apart. Well, I got them both apart, but I'm only going to pull the seals out of one. And I'm going to ratchet strap I got plugs put in the hoses, and I'm going to ratchet strap the quick attach plate up so that I can get the tractor out of here and put Dad's truck back. And I guess I don't know what I'm going to do tomorrow now. I got some stuff I need to move around and put away that's not really video worthy, but working third shift, my Sundays are kind of jacked up anyhow. I can't really work the whole day because I'd like to sneak a nap in so I'm not awake for 24, 25 hours. So I've done that before and that really sucks. But anyway, I guess I don't know what else to show you on this because that's really all I could do without any oil filters or anything else. So I guess as far as this video goes, which it's already getting fairly long, I guess that does it for this one. We'll catch you all on the next one.